Welcome to Postum SDA Cast. Join Julian and Megan as they dive into history, theology, politics, and the future of Seventh-day Adventism. Thinking outside the box and brewing bold conversations. Let's sip, chat, and explore.
Okay, so get ready because today we're going deep into 19th century health reform.
A time when everyone was kind of obsessed with, wellness.
But here's the twist we're zeroing in on Ellen G. White.
Yeah, you see her views on health. They were like super tied to the popular trends of the time.
Right. And they ended up shaping the Seventh-day Adventist Church in ways that are still, get this, debated even today.
180 years later.
It's wild. It's like your grandma's health advice suddenly becoming, church doctrine.
And some of it, well, let's just say science has moved on a bit since then.
A bit. Try a lot.
To really get this, we got to picture America in the 1800s.
Like horse-drawn carriages and bustles.
Exactly. Health reform movements were popping up everywhere.
Like health was the new, fashion.
Haha, kind of.
Yeah.
And you had these big names preaching against things that we might consider pretty normal now.
Like what? Spill the tea?
Well, tobacco, obviously. But also alcohol, meat, even rich pastries.
No donuts. That's harsh.
Right. But this was the scene.
And where does Ellen G. White fit into all of this?
So picture this. Ellen G. White enters the picture.
Dramatic entrance.
Initially, her teachings weren't that focused on health.
Really? I thought that was her, main thing.
It came a bit later. So in 1863, bam, she has this vision about health reform.
A vision? Like a dream or something?
That's how she described it. And everything changes from that point on.
So what was in this vision?
Well, it's interesting because this shift coincided with her meeting a guy named Dr. James Caleb Jackson.
Okay, Dr. Jackson. Who was he?
A hydropathist, which basically means he believed in the healing power of water.
Water cures. That sounds a bit out there.
It was a popular thing back then. And Dr. Jackson ran this super popular health institute.
So he was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, he was. And he was really into this thing called the vital force theory.
Vital force. What's that? Like the force from Star Wars?
Haha, not quite, but kinda. The idea was that humans have this limited amount of vital energy, right?
Like a battery.
Exactly. And certain things depleted this energy.
What kinds of things?
Overwork, obviously. But also stimulating foods like meat, spices, and...
That would tell me.
Especially sex.
Of course. It's always about sex.
Well, for the Victorians, sex was a big deal. They were pretty uptight about it.
I can imagine. So too much excitement and boom, your vital force is drained.
That's the gist of it. And this theory, even though it's totally debunked now, was hugely influential back then.
So Ellen G. White meets this vital force guru.
And she starts incorporating a lot of his teachings into her own.
Really? Like specifically?
Oh, yeah. We see her advocating for a bland, vegan diet, avoiding stimulants like tea and coffee.
Sounds familiar.
She even preaches against, get this, marital excess.
Marital excess. What does that even mean?
Basically, having too much sex, even within marriage.
Whoa. So even married couples had to watch out for draining their vital force.
Pretty much. And it didn't stop there. She also cautioned against all sorts of activities that could, excite the passions.
Okay, so no wild parties.
Haha. More like no reading novels, going to the theater, or even showing your ankles.
Ankles.
Seriously. Can you imagine?
No Netflix and chill, and now no ankles. Tough crowd. But wait, people back then must have noticed these striking similarities between White's teachings and Dr. Jackson's, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely raised some eyebrows.
Like, wait a minute, haven't I heard this before?
Especially within the SDA community.
So what do they think?
Some started to wonder if her visions were really, divine.
Or just borrowed ideas?
Exactly.
So did Ellen G. White address this?
Oh, she insisted they were from God, of course. But then, get this, research reveals that a big chunk of her health writings look a lot like the work of another health reformer.
Another one. Who are we talking about now?
A guy named L.B. Coles. He wrote a book called Philosophy of Health back in 1851.
Philosophy of Health. Sounds intense.
It was, and when you put it side by side with White's work, the resemblance is pretty uncanny.
Uncanny how?
It's not just the general ideas. We're talking whole passages that are practically identical.
Like she copied and pasted.
It really makes you think, right? Was she truly divinely inspired? Or was she really good at, absorbing the popular health trends of the time?
It's a good question. And it makes you wonder about, everything else she wrote about.
That's the thing about history, isn't it? It's full of these little mysteries.
And sometimes Those mysteries lead to bigger questions.
Questions about authority, inspiration, and how we decide what to believe.
It's a lot to unpack, for sure,
Right.
but that's why we're here.
To dive deep and see what we can find.
All right, let's do this.
Okay, detectives, let's get those literary magnifying glasses out. Time to examine some specific instances of plagiarism in Ellen G. White's health writings.
All right, so what kind of evidence are we talking about, like smoking guns?
Well, we're going to be focusing on two main sources that White seems to have borrowed from pretty heavily.
Wait on it.
First up, L.B. Cole's Philosophy of Health, published way back in 1851.
Okay, it rings a bell.
And then we got Dr. James Caleb Jackson's The Sexual Organism and Its Healthful Management. That one hit the scene in 1862.
So we're going to compare White's writings to these books, looking for those aha moments, those undeniable similarities.
Exactly. Let's kick things off with Cole's.
Hit me with it.
So there's this passage from White's Testimonies for the Church where she writes, "The brain nerves which communicate with the entire system are the only medium through which heaven can communicate to man and affect his inmost life.
Okay, I'm following.
Whatever disturbs the circulation of the electric currents in the nervous system lessens the strength of the vital powers, and the result is a deadening of the sensibilities of the mind."
Got it. She's basically saying the nervous system is key to, like, both our physical and spiritual health.
Exactly. And guess what we find in Cole's Philosophy of Health?
Something similar, I bet.
He writes, "Whatever mars the healthy circulation of the electric currents in the nervous system lessens the strength of the vital forces, and, through them, deadens the native susceptibilities of the soul."
Wait, hold up.
The nervous system is the only medium through which truth can reach inferior man. Divinity himself uses no other medium through which to reach the human heart.
Whoa, those are practically identical. It's like she took his words and played a little word scramble.
Right, and this pattern keeps popping up. Check out what White says about fresh air and exercise and healthful living. Exercise is important to digestion and to a healthy condition of body and mind. You need physical exercise.
Sounds like common sense to me.
Well, compare that to what Coles wrote in his book. Time for exercise has an important connection with digestion and is indispensable to health.
Okay, maybe not word for word, but the message is definitely there.
Right, and this happens over and over again. Both emphasize simple foods, eating regularly, not pigging out, and they both warned against those party fouls: tea, coffee, and alcohol.
It's like they were both following the same wellness guru.
Haha, pretty much. And this brings us to another fascinating similarity.
Let me guess. Those animal passions.
Bingo. And this is where Dr. Jackson enters the picture.
This vital force guy.
The one and only. And remember, White spent some time at his health institute learning from him.
So she might have picked up more than just some healthy recipes, huh?
You could say that. White seems to have basically adopted Jackson's views on, the birds and the bees.
Okay, this is getting interesting.
For instance, they both warn against something called marital excess.
Hold up. Marital excess. That sounds intriguing.
Basically, it means having too much sex, even if you're married.
Wow, even married couples had to pump the brakes. Talk about a buzzkill.
It shows just how powerful these ideas about vital force and those dangerous animal passions were.
No wonder the Victorians were so uptight.
And the similarities don't end there. Both White and Jackson were also super concerned about the dangers of, masturbation.
A topic that always made people squirm back then.
Right. And back then, it was seen as a huge problem, both medically and morally.
And what did White and Jackson have to say about it?
Well, they claimed it would lead to all sorts of horrible things, like physical and mental problems, even insanity.
Yikes. Sounds a bit dramatic.
Oh, it was. And they used very similar language and imagery to describe it. It's really striking when you compare their writings.
It's kind of sad, actually, all that fear and shame.
It really is. And it raises an important question. If these ideas were so common back then, how much of what White wrote was actually original?
Good point. Maybe she was just echoing what everyone else was saying, even if she thought it was divine revelation.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it brings us back to this issue of plagiarism.
Because she presented these teachings as, straight from God.
Right. But the evidence suggests she may have been, inspired by a few earthly sources.
So it seems like we're seeing a pattern here. White claiming divine inspiration for ideas that were already floating around in the health reform movement.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if she was consciously copying or if she truly believed these ideas were coming from a higher power.
It's a tough one to figure out. But the more we dig into these comparisons, the more questions pop up.
Okay, ready for some more examples?
Bring them on.
All right, so both White and Coles were really concerned about specific types of food and drinks, especially those they considered too stimulating.
So like energy drinks.
Haha, not quite. But they were both anti-alcohol, anti-tobacco, anti-tea, and anti-coffee.
Wow, that's a lot of no-nos. What was their reasoning?
They believed these things messed with not just your physical health, but also your mental and moral faculties. White even wrote that people who indulged in these substances cannot appreciate the value of spiritual things.
So not just bad for your body, but bad for your soul, too.
Yeah, their sensibilities are blunted and sin doesn't appear very sinful. It was a pretty big deal.
So moderation in all things.
Pretty much. They were all about self-control and living in harmony with, nature's laws.
It's interesting how much they believed that what you ate could actually affect your morals.
Right. Like eat a cheeseburger, become a bad person. Doesn't quite hold up today.
But for them, it was all connected.
Yeah.
Physical health, mental well-being, and moral character.
Exactly. And this applied to everyone, especially children. They thought kids were super susceptible to the negative influences of, unhealthy habits and environments.
So, like, don't let them eat candy. It'll turn them into delinquents.
Pretty much. Both White and Coles warned against giving kids rich foods or anything too spicy. They believed it would damage their health and weaken their character.
And, of course, these ideas were presented as, divine commands.
Absolutely. And if you believed in White and Coles' authority, these teachings had a huge impact on your life.
It's a powerful example of how ideas, even ones that seem pretty out there now, can really shape how people live.
No doubt. And it makes you think about how our own beliefs and values are shaped by the world around us. What we read, who we listen to, all of it.
So where do we go from here? We've seen all these similarities, and it seems pretty clear that White borrowed a lot from Coles and Jackson.
But what does this mean for the SDA Church today? How do they deal with these plagiarism accusations?
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a question that's still being debated and discussed. And we'll dive into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, can't wait. This is getting good. Okay, so we've seen how Ellen G. White took a lot of inspiration, let's call it, from other health reformers.
Yeah, inspiration.
Which, raises questions about whether her ideas were really, divine revelations.
And that leads to a big question. How do her teachings stack up against, actual science?
Time to put those teachings to the test.
Yeah.
What about her thing about a strict vegan diet?
Right. She believed that meat was, bad for you on every level.
Yeah.
Physically, morally, even spiritually.
Like it would turn you into a werewolf or something.
Not quite.
Yeah.
But she thought it would, increase your animal nature and make you less spiritual.
Ah, right, that whole vital force thing.
Which, as we know, has been totally debunked.
No scientific basis for it whatsoever. So eating a steak won't make you less spiritual.
Nope. But what about the health aspects? Is a vegan diet actually good for you?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, modern science says a well-planned vegan diet can be really healthy.
Really?
Yep. It can lower your risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, even some cancers.
Huh. So maybe she was onto something there.
In some ways, yeah. But you got to be careful with a vegan diet. You can miss out on some important nutrients if you're not careful.
Makes sense. And White wasn't just saying eat more veggies. She was like, meat is evil.
Right, which seems a bit extreme, especially now that we know there's no scientific reason to avoid meat altogether.
It must be a bit awkward for the SDA Church these days, trying to reconcile those teachings with modern nutrition science.
Oh, absolutely. It's a balancing act for sure. Okay, ready for another reality check?
Hit me.
What about those evil stimulants? Tea and coffee. White considered them straight up poisonous.
A lot of people back then did, to be fair.
True. But modern science paints a different picture. While too much caffeine isn't good for you, moderate amounts of tea and coffee can actually have health benefits.
Hold on, you're telling me my morning coffee is good for me?
You heard that right. Studies show it can boost brain function, lower your risk of type 2 diabetes and Parkinson's, even protect against some cancers.
Wow, talk about a turnaround. From poison to health drink.
And tea is no slouch either, packed with antioxidants.
It's amazing how much our understanding has changed.
Right. It shows that science is always evolving, and we got to be willing to adjust our beliefs as we learn more.
Speaking of evolving beliefs,
Yeah.
What about White's views on sexuality? She seemed pretty obsessed with controlling those animal passions.
Oh, yeah, big time. And remember, those teachings were all based on the vital force idea.
Which we know is a big ol' myth.
Exactly. So what does modern science have to say about all that?
Drum roll, please.
Modern science says sexuality is a natural and healthy part of being human.
Not some evil force to be feared and suppressed.
Exactly. In fact, a healthy sex life can actually be good for you.
Get out of here. Really?
Seriously, studies show it can boost your immune system, reduce stress, help you sleep better, even lower your blood pressure.
So White got it completely backward.
Pretty much. Instead of being harmful, sex might actually be beneficial.
Which makes her teachings on marital excess and masturbation even more problematic, right?
Absolutely. By pushing this idea that any sexual activity was dangerous, even between married couples, she contributed to a culture of shame and fear around sex.
And that legacy still affects people in the SDA community today.
No doubt, a lot of Adventists still carry that baggage, even though science has debunked those ideas.
So where does that leave us with Ellen G. White and her health teachings? It seems like a mixed bag.
Definitely a mixed bag. Some of her ideas, like promoting a plant-based diet, fresh air, and exercise, those were ahead of their time.
But a lot of them have been proven wrong.
And it's clear she was heavily influenced by the trends of her era.
Which, let's be real, were often based on bad science and moral judgments.
And that poses a real challenge for those who see her as a prophet.
Right. How do you reconcile teachings that have been scientifically disproven with the idea of divine inspiration?
It's a tough question, and one that the SDA Church is still wrestling with.
It's a reminder that even the most revered figures can be wrong, and we should always be open to questioning our beliefs in light of new evidence.
Well, folks, that was quite a journey. We've delved deep into Ellen G. White's world of health reform, exploring the history, the plagiarism accusations, and the science behind her claims.
It's a fascinating story that really makes you think about the nature of inspiration, how science changes over time, and the importance of, using your brain.
Exactly. What stood out to you most in this deep dive? What questions are you still pondering?
We encourage you to keep exploring this topic, examine the evidence, and come to your own conclusions.
And until next time, stay curious, folks.
You've been listening to Postum SDA Cast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget to check out our other episodes, and we'll see you next time for more bold takes and fresh perspectives.